God's trumpet call presence. Third reading from the Book of Leviticus. 26th reading from the Book of Torah. Outline of Torah portion. The priests begin their ministry. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1 to verse 24. On the 8th day, Moshe summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1. And Moshe commanded Aaron to take a bull calf for his offering, a ram for his burnt offering, both without defect, and present them before the Lord. To the Israelites he said, take a male goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, both a year old, without defect, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for a fellowship offering to sacrifice before the Lord, together with a grain offering mixed with olive oil. And Moshe said that the Lord will appear to them that day. And he repeated the same promise in verse 9:6, that the glory of the Lord will appear to them. Aaron came to the altar and slaughtered the calf as a sin offering for himself. And his sons brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood and put it on the horns of the altar. Rest of the blood he poured out at the base of the altar. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. His sons handed him the blood, and he splashed it against the sides of the altar. Aaron and sons offered the sacrifices according to the instructions given by Moshe. Sacrifices were made in the presence of the entire assembly of the children of Israel and Moshe himself. Aaron then brought the offering that was for the people, the goat for the sin offering, and slaughtered it and offered it for a sin offering, as he did with the first one. The burnt offering too was offered in the prescribed way. Grain offering was brought, and handful of it burnt on the altar in addition to the morning burnt offering. An ox and a ram slaughtered as the fellowship offering for the people. He splashed the blood against the sides of the altar. Sacrifices were done according to the instructions given by Moshe. Aaron lifted his hands towards the people and blessed them. Having sacrificed the sin offering, burnt offering, fellowship offering, Aaron stepped down. Moshe and Aaron went into the tabernacle. After they came out of tabernacle, they blessed the people again. It was at that moment that the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 23. The glory of the Lord is often compared to fire. Torah says the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people, not to very few people, but to all the people as a visible cloud over the tabernacle and as a consuming fire. The fire came out from the presence of the Lord, consumed the burnt offering, which was an indication that God has accepted the gifts of the children of Israel. Torah says that when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell face down. In that tabernacle, God's desire to dwell among the people and people's desire to draw near to him was fulfilled that day. We have a lot to learn from the worshippers who were present that day and from the first worship service. Our attitude towards worship must be like that of the children of Israel present that day. They gathered with one intention, that is to worship the Lord. They gathered with expectation. They brought sacrifices, gifts to God. They did not come for a public performance, nor were they looking for to be entertained. There was no music to entertain them. They came with the expectation that their gifts will be accepted by the Lord. Death of Nadab and Abihu. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1 to 7. Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. And they offered unauthorized or strange fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1 and 2. Nadab and Abihu were not ordinary Jews. They were chosen for the priesthood. They were eyewitnesses to many great things the Lord did for the people of Israel. They saw the miracles God performed to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt. They heard the voice of God, witnessed the fire, lightning and smoke, and experienced the thunder and the earthquake with the rest of the nation at Mount Sinai. They were with Moshe, Aaron, and 70 elders on Mount Sinai. Exodus chapter 24, verse 1 and 2. They saw God and ate and drank. Exodus chapter 24, verse 9 to 11. Torah says they each took his censer, put fire on it, put incense on it, and they offered a profane, unauthorized, strange fire before the Lord. The fire on the altar was kindled by God himself. Exodus chapter 9, verse 24. Fire Nadab and Abihu offered was not kindled from the altar of burnt offerings, not associated with the atoning and redeeming work of sacrifice. They brought fire from some source other than the altar when they offered the incense. What they did, God had not commanded them to do. The fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Fire from heaven occurs 7 times in the Torah, 6 times in a beneficial way, and 6 times in judgment. The lesson that we can learn from this is that we need to remember that God is a holy God. He is our Abba, the Creator God, the Provider, Sustainer, Redeemer. But He is also a consuming fire. When we draw near to God, we must remember to regard Him as holy, and God must be glorified before the people. Our work we do for Him, too, will be judged by fire according to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13 to 15. The aftermath of God's judgment on Nadab and Abihu. The bodies of Nadab and Abihu was removed by the sons of Uzziel, Aaron's uncle. Moshe did not allow Aaron and remaining 2 sons to mourn the death of Nadab and Abihu during the duration of their shift, as they were priests serving the Lord, and mourning was not permitted in God's dwelling place. Conduct prescribed for priests. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8 to 20. Aaron was directly spoken to by the Lord. You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, so that you can distinguish between the holy and common, between the unclean and the clean. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 9 to 10. This commandment was given immediately after the death of Nadab and Abihu. 2 priestly responsibilities are mentioned. First, that they need to distinguish between the holy and common, between the unclean and the clean. Second, they are to teach the Israelites all the decrees the Lord has given them through Moshe. Moshe spoke on the priest portion to Aaron and his remaining 2 sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. What was left over from a grain offering belonged to the priest and had to be eaten beside the altar. It must be considered most holy. The breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering belonged to the priest and his household. It could be eaten in any clean place. Moshe's inquiry about the goat of the sin offering. He inquired as to why Eleazar and Ithamar did not eat the portions of sacrifice given to the priest to eat. After the death of Nadab and Abihu, the food on the altar had not been consumed. Eleazar and Ithamar followed Aaron's example. Aaron did not eat the sin offering because he mourned the loss of Nadab and Abihu. Aaron said such things as this have happened to me. Would the Lord have been pleased if I had eaten the sin offering today? Moshe was content with that explanation. Clean and unclean food. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 1 to verse 23. The Lord spoke to both Moshe and Aaron. The Lord addressed both the government and the priesthood. Having given the laws concerning sacrifices and the priests, the Lord addressed what concerns ordinary and everyday life of the people. Leviticus chapter 11 addresses the animals that are clean and unclean, fit or unfit for consumption. Among the animals that are on the earth, verse 1 to 8, these include the mammals that are land-based. The rule is, any animal that has a divided hoof and that chews the cud is permitted to eat. The animal that only chews the cud or only have a divided hoof are ceremonially unclean. Their meat is not permitted to eat or must not touch their carcasses. Among the creatures that are in water, verse 9 to verse 12, any water creature that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, could be eaten. Birds and other flying things, verse 13 to 19. No common criteria, but should not be a bird of prey. 20 specific types of birds are given, which are considered as unclean and forbidden for eating. Insects, verse 20 to 23. Flying insects with legs jointed above their feet should be eaten. Locusts and cricket and grasshoppers are examples. The animals that are permitted to eat are called tahor, clean or fit. Animals that are forbidden are called tame, unclean, unfit. The forbidden animals are not unclean or unfit when they are living. There are many explanations as to why these dietary laws were given to the children of Israel. God is the creator and He has the right to address every area of our lives, including what we should eat and what we shouldn't. God wanted to consecrate the people of Israel, to sanctify or set them apart from the pagan nations and their practices. Permitted type of animals are better for our bodies. Unfit type of animals are mostly scavengers. They carry diseases. Many scavengers act as the host for parasitic organisms, and they are regularly in contact with dead bodies. The other type is predators. They are unclean because they eat both the flesh and the blood of animals. Dietary laws promoted cleanliness, health, and welfare of the families. These laws stop the spread of diseases. Food we eat affects both our physical and spiritual health. Our character and spiritual sensitivity gets influenced by what we eat. In Leviticus chapter 11 verse 43, first warning is for the body, second warning is for the soul. Eating unclean food makes a person's heart encrusted through ingestion of unclean animals, and it can be no longer access the Holy Spirit. His soul becomes impure. His connection with the God of Israel weakens. Eating kosher food causes the attachment of a holy, pure spirit. The soul will enjoy the benefit from the food. Touching unclean animals. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 24 to 43. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 24 to 28 discuss about the disposal of the carcasses of unclean animals. The people who disposed of the unclean animal had to deal with their uncleanliness by washing, and they will be unclean till evening. Whoever pick up one of their carcasses must wash their clothes and will be unclean till evening. Animals that walk on all fours, those that walk on their paws are unclean for you. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean till evening. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 29 to 30. More unclean animals. Reptiles and other creeping things. The mole, the mouse, and the large lizard, and its kind. The gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These animals shall be unclean and could not be eaten. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 31 to 38. Transmission of uncleanliness from unclean animals. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. Some things could be cleansed by washing in water. A clay vessel contaminated had to be destroyed. Contaminated food or drink had to be thrown out. Cooking tools were unclean if contaminated with dead unclean animals. Everything on which a part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean. These laws promoted a general state of cleanliness inside home. These laws made a great impact on the health and welfare of the family. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 39 to 40. Carcasses of clean animals. If a clean animal dies, natural death, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. He who carries his carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 41 to 43. Creeping animals considered unclean. Every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. These animals are mentioned in verse 29 to 30. It was considered highly sinful and idolatrous to eat these forbidden creeping things. Who should comply with kosher laws? Leviticus chapter 11 verse 44 to 47. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves therefore and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not make yourselves unclean with any of the swarming things that swarm on the earth. Leviticus chapter 11 verse 44. Children of Israel were the first recipients of the biblical dietary laws. God intended to set apart the children of Israel from the pagan nations. His command is to be holy, for I am holy. Are the biblical dietary laws only for the children of Israel? What about the Gentile believers who are grafted to the people of Israel, who by faith have become sons and daughters of Abraham? Are they required to follow biblical dietary laws? The apostle set out the minimum standard in Acts chapter 15 verse 21, that is to abstain from things contaminated by idols and from fornication, from what is strangled, and from blood. It does not limit them to the minimum standard. During the time of the apostles, the Gentile believers attended the synagogue services and learned the Torah. They too became aware of the Jewish dietary laws and the distinction between clean and unclean animals. The didache, or the teaching of the 12 apostles, encouraged new Gentile disciples not to be limited to the minimum standard, for it says, "And concerning food regulations, bear what you are able, but against that which is sacrificed to idols, be exceedingly on the guard. For it is the service of dead gods." Didache chapter 6 verse 3. So, any Gentile believer who wants to comply with biblical dietary laws are free to do so. How can there be any objection? One could say that Gentile believers are not required to comply with the kosher laws because they are obsolete now. Observing them could result in bondage to the law. These assumptions are based on certain scriptures, such as Mark chapter 7 verse 2, Mark chapter 7 verse 19, Acts chapter 10 verse 28, 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 12, and Romans chapter 14 verse 14. The truth is that these scriptures have been misunderstood. They are in fact certain debates that arose within Judaism. The debate was not about whether the animals are clean or unclean, but they were looking for clarification on certain issues relating to food. These refer to change in kosher status of food. Clean become unclean or defiled because it was sacrificed to idols, prepared by Gentiles, handled with unwashed hands, or tainted by idolatry. Yeshua HaMashiach or his disciples never considered unclean animals as food to eat.